Welcome. If I haven't met you before, my name's Greer. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the minister here at Adamstown. Welcome to everyone here in person and everyone at home on Zoom as well. In my previous role as the Period of Discernment Coordinator with the Synod, I led a retreat for those who were doing a period of discernment and particularly exploring that question of, am I called to ordained ministry, the phase 1 period of discernment. And you'll see in the newsletter I wrote a little bit about our two wonderful people here at Adamstown who are doing a period of discernment. Glenn, who's doing a phase 1 period, and Soph, who's doing a period of discernment as well, who's hiding behind the computers so no one can see her. But I loved this process of supporting people in their period of discernment, this period of exploring what are my gifts and what am I called to do. And as part of that, I would walk with people through their life story and I would ask them to reflect upon their life story. And I had learnt this way of doing it, which I had done before and I'd led people through before, and so it was a joy to be able to do it again, where you sit down with a set amount of time, like a good chunk of time to be able to do it. And I encourage you, if you'd like to do this, it's a really easy activity of reflection, and it's a really beautiful way to reflect on your life story. You get a whole heap of post-it notes, and you just recall memories from your life and write each one on a post-it note and just keep writing them, writing down the core things that have happened in your life, where you've lived, people who have influenced you, those things that have happened along the way, and you write all these post-it notes out. And when you've kind of exhausted your memory, you start to arrange them in chapters, seasons of your life, looking at the different seasons of life, where you were, what was happening, and then you give each chapter, each season, a literal chapter heading. Like if this was a book, what would that chapter of your life have been called? And then at the bottom of it, so you've got the chapter heading, you've got this season of your life, and then at the bottom, you write on another post-it note, what's the lesson I learnt here? What did I take from this experience in life? What did this teach me about who I am, about how the world works, about how people operate, about how relationships work? And you then look back at this life story of the experiences you've had, these seasons in your life, and the lessons you've learned along the way. And sometimes in looking back, you go, I don't like that lesson I learned. I would like to unlearn that or relearn that. And you look at the different lessons along the way and how they have shaped you and how they have made you into the person you are today, and how God has been working through that life story and is continuing to work through that life story. When we come to this passage today of this story, I think for Peter, this would be a pretty big post-it note, right? This experience is one of those life-changing experiences and stories that would have stayed with him forever and would have shaped his life from that point forward. We're sitting in the Gospel of Matthew. We heard beautifully from Glenn last week. Didn't he do a good job of preaching? If you missed it, please check out the video because it's well worth catching up on his sermon from last week. But we're picking up immediately after that reading. So if you were here, if you remember that reading, it was the feeding of the 5,000. But Glenn beautifully put that in context for us to show Jesus was actually just discovered that John the Baptist had been beheaded. He was wanting to grieve. He was wanting some time out. He was looking for space for himself. And then there were crowds of people who were around him who were hungry and in need, and his compassion made him stay and care for them. And then we have this verse from the beginning where Jesus tells them, to his disciples, get in the boat and go across in front of me. I reckon, first of all, the word that Jesus used here insists, like he compels the disciples to get in the boat. The Greek word, which I'm definitely not going to try and pronounce in front of Strato, who can probably pronounce it better. But the word insisted, it's like compelled. It was like almost shoved them in there, forced them to go. This wasn't the gentle Jesus. Why don't you go? You go ahead of me. It's fine. Nothing like that. It's like, get on the boat. I need some time on my own. He's grieving, he's desperate for time on his own, and he compels the disciples to get in the boat and to go across before him. And I think this is the miracle in the story, that Jesus actually got some time on his own. How blessed, how beautiful. He got a little few hours of peace and quiet. As a mother of 3, the only peace and quiet I've had is when I go to the bathroom for the last 21 years. You go to the bathroom and close the door. Sometimes I've gone to the bathroom when I haven't even needed to go to the bathroom, just to have a little peace and quiet. This is kind of a miraculous thing for Jesus to have this time on his own. He's having time for his grief, time to be with God, time to be alone. And he has this space as night falls. And I wonder, what did Jesus know of what was about to happen when he made those disciples go into the boat? What did he know of the winds that were to come? When he took this time out on his own, did he know that the disciples were going to have a rough time out on the water? Because things didn't go great for them. It wasn't a huge storm, as in rain and lightning and thunder, but it was wind. Really intense, fierce wind. To the point that the word, again, in Greek, used to describe how the boat experienced that wind, the waves, is that the boat was tormented. It wasn't just tossed gently about and better take your motion sickness pills. It was tormented. The same word in Greek, ask Strato later, that that was used in the Gospels to describe someone who was possessed by an evil spirit. They were tormented. The boat was tormented by the waves. One commentator translated as the kind of tormenting that exhausts every resource you have and leaves you defeated and despairing. And where was Jesus? Back on the shore, having some quiet time. Lucky Jesus. About 1 kilometre from them. Now, these disciples had been in a boat before when there was a storm, but then Jesus was with them and he woke up and he calmed the storm. I can't imagine what the disciples were thinking, because now Jesus wasn't even in the boat with them, but was off on shore somewhere. They were distant from help and distant from Christ's presence. So what was going through their mind at that time? Why is the wind so rough tonight? Why are the waves so high? Why am I always getting caught in a boat in these situations? Why is this always happening to me? Where's Jesus? Hang on a minute, wasn't it Jesus who told us to get in this boat in the first place? Jesus told us to get in this boat, and now we're in this storm. What on earth is going on? Doesn't Jesus care about us? What have I done wrong? I did what Jesus asked me to do, and here I am in a storm, in these winds that are tormenting us. The boat was tormented by the wind and the waves, and no doubt their hearts and their spirits were tormented as well. And then Jesus shows up. But that doesn't really calm the disciples at first. Don't you love the line, "Is it a ghost?" They're scared witless. It's the height of their fear. Jesus' presence doesn't bring calm and ease straight away, but it just makes them more afraid and scared until they hear his voice when he says, "Take heart, I am. Do not be afraid." This is a little different wording to what we heard in the inclusive translation, a little different wording to what's recorded in the NRSVU, which is what I normally use. But this is a more literal translation of the Greek. Take heart, I am, do not be afraid. Those words, do not be afraid and do not fear, are repeated so often in the Bible. When angels appear, when God speaks, when Christ speaks to followers, do not be afraid. even when the winds are so high, even when we're tormented. Do not be afraid. Why? Because I am. These words that God spoke to Moses when Moses said, "Who do I say you are?" And Yahweh says, "Say I am. I am." This definitive statement of God. Jesus turns up and doesn't just say, "It's all going to be okay." Jesus turns up and reminds them who Christ is. I am. And then you have Peter's response. It's an interesting one, isn't it? "If it's you, call me out to follow you." Does he not believe it is? Or does he just want to be where Jesus is? Does he think, that looks fun, I want to do that too? What's going through his mind when he says, "If it's you, call me out to follow you"? In the Gospel of Matthew, we have these stories of Jesus, these teachings and parables and miracles, and in the midst of it, we've got different people's reactions and responses to who Jesus is, who they say Jesus is, and how they respond with their lives. And here we have this story of Peter responding in a kind of interesting way. And it's one of those stories in the scriptures where we're not really told, there's no direction to say afterwards, Peter was great, Peter had courage, Peter was wonderful, be like Peter. I've heard commentators say, don't be like Peter, who tests Jesus and has to get out there to prove that it is Jesus. Be like the disciples who can stay in the boat and stay steady and calm and keep going and trust. We're not really told one way or the other. Who are we meant to be like? Who's our role model here? We just have this story of people experiencing Christ and responding. It must have taken incredible courage to step out of that boat onto water, onto something we know with all our logical reasoning cannot hold us up. And yet Peter does it. And I wonder how quickly that moment was where the rational brain went, what are you doing? You can't do this. Look at the waves. Look at the wind. This is crazy. What are you doing? What are you doing? And the fear overtakes and he starts to sink. It's pretty normal, pretty human. And it's in that moment when Peter's fear overwhelms him again that Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him. When we think about the lessons we learn in life, lessons that shape how we see the world, how we understand who we are, how we understand who God is, lessons that shape us and hold us and carry us through life. When we think about these lessons that have been part of our life story the whole way along, I think about the lessons that have been the strongest in my life, the most powerful, the most life-changing. They haven't been in the easy times. They've been in the hard times. They've been in the times where I have been sinking and needing to look up and find Christ catching me. I wonder what the lesson for Peter was here. I wonder what his post-it note might say. Jesus saves me. Jesus turns up. Jesus is here with me. And Jesus says to him, you have such little faith. Why did you doubt? Maybe it was, oh, Peter, you have such little faith. Maybe it was you shouldn't have doubted. But I reckon it's pretty rational and reasonable to doubt when you're in those waves and that wind. I don't think it's a judgment. I think it's Jesus saying, you had such little faith, but I'm here and I saved you anyway. Just like the story Glenn was talking about last week, the small amount, the scarcity that we bring, even the smallest of faith is enough. And God will take that and hold on to us and do amazing and beautiful and wonderful things through us. And it's only then, after Peter's stepped out of the boat, after Peter's given it a go, become overwhelmed, looked to Jesus, been saved, hopped back in the boat, it's only then that Jesus calms the wind. The disciples are distant from Christ, tormented by the wind, alone. Jesus feels so far away, and then he draws near. Peter is sinking into the waves, terrified. The wind feels so much stronger than Jesus, and Jesus catches him. And even still, the wind continues to howl, and the waves continue to torment, and then Jesus stills it all. And how do the disciples respond to this revelation of Christ? They declare, "Truly you are the Son of God. Truly you are Christ. Truly we will follow you and give our life, our all." I wonder what post-it notes you're in the middle of writing right now in your life. I wonder what lessons you're in the midst of. What are you learning about who you are? What are you learning about who God is? Where is God calling you to be? Are you listening and following? Wherever that might be, whether it's stepping out in courage, whether it's staying steady in the boat. Are you trusting God? And how are you responding to Christ today?